Welcome to our weekly 3-minute therapy podcast. I'm Dr. Michael Edelstein, clinical psychologist. I'm an expert in rational emotive behavior therapy, and my co-host these days is Mick Berry, also an expert in rational emotive behavior therapy. And rational emotive behavior therapy, REBT, was developed by Albert Ellis in the mid 80s, and it created a sea change in the course of the psychotherapy movement from the old psychoanalytic model, looking at your upbringing, your parents, um, those kinds of things, and looking at your beliefs at the present that causes your emotional and behavioral problems. And there are three main demands that cause emotional and behavioral problems. And one is a demand on oneself. I must do well and get approval, or else I'm no good, which leads to anxiety. A second is a demand on others. You must treat me well, or else you're no good. And that leads to resentment, hostility, and anger. And then the third belief is an impersonal demand, not a demand on oneself or others, but a demand on the conditions of one's life. And it takes the form of my life must be fair, easy, and hassle-free. And that tends to lead to addictions and procrastination. So those are the three main musts. And the solution, when you identify a must, is to question, challenge, contradict it again and again and again. That takes much practice to change your thinking. And Mick, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that covers it well.
Okay, good. And today we have a question from a viewer, which I will read to you. He says, I can identify the demand, I must be liked, and see that I can accept myself anyways. But I find that even without the rigid belief, it's very hard to sufficiently change the extreme belief to a level where these types of things roll off my back relatively easily. They stick with me for a while. Well, I have a number of thoughts about that. So I'll start. And the first thing is, what are you doing to change the belief? Because I found a lot of clients miss the important point that the way to change the belief is usually in writing, question, challenge, and contradict your musts, looking for the evidence, writing down any evidence you have for the must and showing yourself, although there's evidence for your preference, I prefer to be liked, but there's no reason I must. So that's something that's often clients miss, and it's something important to work on, repeat, and reinforce. Mick, did you have a thought?
Yeah, well, you mentioned to dispute it, but also reinforcing the rational belief at E, the effective new belief in the ABCDEF exercise. I do not have to have the approval of others. I can accept myself no matter what. Nobody approving of me makes me accept myself, and in fact the whole world could approve of me, and or the whole world could think I'm glorious, and if I still think I need their approval, I will still not be satisfied. So it's rigorously, vigorously, passionately applying the rational thoughts at E while also vigorously disputing them at D. And it's practice, practice, practice. But then also, it's very possible to obsess about I must not have this belief, to lay a secondary demand upon it. I must not need the approval of others. And if somebody is demanding to not have any particular irrational belief, it will be virtually impossible to let it go.
Yeah, great. Also, the viewer says it's very hard to sufficiently change the extreme belief. Yes, it is hard, and that's why Mick is saying practice changing it passionately, regularly, on a regular basis again and again and again. So it's not one trial learning. You're not going to normally change your belief overnight when you first start doing this. Later on, you may, but not at first. So it is hard. So work hard at it. Mick?
Well, and also I think it's quite possible that this individual, I know I've done this, is telling himself that they must not even want the approval of others, which is ridiculous because we all benefit from the approval of other people and other people liking us. So don't take it to the extreme of thinking you want to have no care whatsoever about what other people think of you. What other people think of us is quite beneficial when they think highly of us. There can be big, big benefits of that. If our boss at work thinks highly of us, we'll have more job security, which is very important. If our partner in a relationship thinks highly of us, we'll have a much more secure and probably a happier relationship. So I'm conjecturing here, but I think that I know it's possible that somebody could take it so far as to not want to have the desire of anybody approving of them. I don't know if this individual is doing that, but I would urge people to watch out for trying to eradicate the desire along with the demand.
Very good, very good. And also, the viewer goes on to say it's very hard to sufficiently change the extreme belief to a level, uh, and we're not trying to, our goal, ultimate goal is not to change these extreme beliefs to a level, but it's to uproot these extreme or these demands, these rigid beliefs entirely, not just decrease it to a level. But as you work at it, uh, what often happens is the must becomes less and less at the forefront of your brain, and it does get reduced eventually, if you're totally successful, to a point where it's no longer, the musts are no longer part of your philosophy, part of your perspective in dealing with yourself, others, and the world. Mick?
Well, I was going to say if this person says reduce it to a level, I think what he or she means is to still have the desire, but not have a demand, because people often confuse that if I want something, that's simply a mild demand. It's actually not a mild demand whatsoever. It's an entirely different thought, but it does get muddled and mixed up with the demand for something. But let me also extend that if this person wants some personal help, they can send their email to the comment section, and I could work with them free of charge. And also, I want to point out that, yeah, something can be difficult to change or get rid of our demands and retain our desires, but that hardly means it's impossible. So if somebody is finding it not working whatsoever, they're most likely not catching the demand or not disputing or passionately reinforcing the rational thought, or they're placing a secondary demand upon the initial demand, in this case of I must be approved by other people. It's just because something's difficult, that doesn't mean it's impossible. And also, it's important to acknowledge if somebody's doing the exercise and the exercise is successful, and for a minute or two, just momentarily, somebody says, okay, I don't have to have the approval of other people, then they have succeeded in doing it, and they simply need to reinforce the practice of getting rid of the demand. It's acquiring new habitual self-helping thinking. And once we do that, then we can prolong it and do it more frequently, and then we've achieved it. Don't think that once this is done, the problem solved. As fallible human beings, we can return to our rational thoughts, but that doesn't mean we can't get rid of them again. And then I've found in my experience, and I think this is the experience of almost everybody with REBT, we get rid of irrational thoughts. The irrational thoughts come back. We get rid of them again more easily. The irrational thoughts return. We get rid of them more frequently, more consistency. The irrational thoughts, I'm sorry, I think I said rational. The irrational thoughts return less frequently, and eventually the irrational thoughts dissipate and almost never return. I myself hardly ever get depressed, whereas I used to be depressed all the time. If I get depressed now, it might be once every 2 or 3 months for 30 seconds.
Yeah. Okay. You're a great model for a successful REBT client. And finally, the viewer says they, talking about the irrational beliefs, they stick with me for a while. And I think you just addressed that, Mick, that these beliefs may stick with you for a while. You may abolish them, then they come back. But the reason for that, to some extent, is because you're an imperfect human, and it's rare that you're going to do something perfectly. Even Albert Ellis, who created rational emotive behavior therapy, had irrational beliefs at times. Mick?
Well, and I wanted to say if this individual doing the ABC exercise is finding alleviation of the irrational thoughts, then it is working. If they're not finding any change whatsoever, then they need some help with the execution of the exercise. Let me ask, in doing the exercise, Michael, somebody can lessen their irrational thoughts without getting rid of them so that the irrational thoughts are not as debilitating. Would that be correct? They could diminish while not go away.
Absolutely. Yes, I totally agree with that.
Yeah, but as we do it more and more, the irrational thoughts can completely leave.
Yeah.
Yeah, often people, I think what's one of the craziest things about being a human being is most people don't even know how their mind works, that our thinking contributes to our emotions. We aren't given a playbook on how do I operate my mind and my emotions. Most people, if that's what REBT tries to offer people and does offer people instructions on how does your mind work? Here's how your mind works. Here's how your emotions work. Here's the formula. It's not hard to understand, but it does take practice, practice, practice. But the good news is, as we practice it, we get better at it. We become more efficient. It's much easier to do, and we can live our life pretty much anxiety free, though not entirely, but we don't have to live entirely anxiety free. You can have anxiety for 10 seconds. Big deal. Who cares?
Yeah, not only are we not given an instruction book for how our emotions work, but it's the opposite because the idea is reinforced all the time from the time you learn language until the end of your life. You always hear people say, this situation caused me anxiety, depression, anger, rather than I caused it myself. Mick?
And even without other people saying that, people put that together all on their own. Many people are born to parents who raise them in as rational a way as could ever be expected, and they themselves are a neurotic basket case. It is can be due to learning from the outside or our biological proclivity towards self-defeating thinking. But the good news is we are capable of thinking in self-helping ways in addition to self-defeating ways, and we can increase our self-helping thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. And evidence for what you said about our biological predisposition and our genetics, and that certain problems tend to run in families because our genes are passed down from our parents and grandparents. So there's evidence that depression, for example, tends to run in families. And if you're depressed, it's likely that one of your parents or one of your grandparents were depressed and you got their gene, but genes are just an influence on your emotions, not a cause. The cause is your thinking. So look for your demands, look for your musts and shoulds, and question, challenge, and uproot them. Mick?
And Michael, don't you think it's also possible to not have much of a tendency towards irrational thinking, but to have a little bit of a tendency? And if you pay attention to that tendency and believe the stupid irrational thinking, then you'll have more of a tendency to think irrationally, more of a tendency to upset yourself. So you could start the world even with a biological genetic makeup of thinking rationally and learn to think irrationally and become a very irrational thinker. So no matter what your predisposition is, we all can benefit from learning to think more rationally.
Yeah, yeah. And I agree that not only are we recommending to reinforce rational thinking, but some people tend to reinforce irrational thinking. They do irrational emotive behavior therapy and make themselves more disturbed. Nick?
And I wanted to say one of the devices REBT does use is to put ourselves in situations where the irrational thoughts are more likely to come up. This person could, if they are trying to overcome needing the approval of others, put themselves in a situation where they could intentionally try to not have the approval of other people. You don't want to do it in a way that is going to physically hurt other people or physically hurt you or endanger you in any way physically. But you could, as Albert Ellis has advocated, walk down the street and say to somebody, "Excuse me, I've just gotten out of a mental institution. Could you tell me what month this is?" And this person is most likely going to, well, if they believe you, they're going to think you just got out of a mental institution and think that maybe you've got some problems. And you'd probably not prefer other people to have problems. Or, as Albert Ellis advocated, people could get on the subway in New York and call out the stops: 42nd Street, 48th Street, 52nd Street. And invariably, what happened is a third of the people got up and found a seat farther away from them. A third of the people did nothing, and a third of the people came up and said, "Could you tell me how long it's going to take to get to 58th Street?" And they made friends. So even people think it proves that you don't need the approval of other people. So this individual could find an innocuous situation in which they are neurotically thinking they need the approval of other people and challenge that and actually go for not having the approval of other people and get concrete everyday proof that they don't need the approval of other people. So that would be one other exercise that could be done to hurry up the process of getting over the irrational thought that we must have the approval of other people, no matter how much it would benefit us, no matter how much it doesn't matter one lick. We still don't need the approval of other people. Nothing in this world must go the way we want it to go.
Very good. Well, we could go on and on about the wonders of REBT. In fact, Albert Ellis did go on and on about this. He's written over 80 books about various aspects of REBT, and I've written 5 books on it. The
I've
most
written one.
Mick and I have written one, and the most popular of the book we wrote was called Stage Fright, and my most popular book is called 3 Minute Therapy: Change Your Thinking, Change Your Life. And so we'll conclude now, but I'd like to thank Chris Rossini, our tech engineer, for helping us with the technical part of this. Comment below if you have thoughts or questions. Give us a thumbs up if you got something out of this. And volunteer if you'd like to be on with us. We'll cure you, no extra charge. suggest subjects, as this viewer did, which we just discussed. If you have subjects you'd like us to discuss, and subscribe to the 3 Minute Therapy podcast to do what, Mick?
To stay on the rational side of life.